When people think about the Great Depression, they often imagine stock market crashes, bank failures, breadlines, and years of suffering. But one of the most debated decisions of that era didn't happen on Wall Street. It happened in Washington, when President Herbert Hoover signed a tariff law that would reshape global trade at a deeply fragile moment in economic history. This law, known as the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, was created during a time of fear and uncertainty. Industries were struggling, farmers were falling into debt, and the U.S. economy was beginning to slide into crisis. Many believed that raising tariffs would protect American jobs and stabilize prices. Instead, the decision helped trigger a wave of retaliation around the world, deepening the economic pain that millions were already facing. Today, discussions about tariffs and protectionism have returned. Prices are rising, global tensions are shifting, and policymakers once again debate whether restricting imports can help strengthen local industries. Because of this, the story of Hoover and the tariffs of 1930 is a powerful reminder of how economic decisions made in moments of pressure can shape entire generations. To understand why Herbert Hoover supported higher tariffs, we have to step back into the late 1920s. Throughout this period, American farmers were struggling. After World War I, global demand for U.S. crops fell sharply, leaving farmers with heavy debts and falling prices. Cheaper agricultural imports from countries like Canada and Argentina made the situation worse, and many rural communities were urgently calling for protection. During his 1928 campaign, Hoover promised farmers that he would help raise agricultural prices and shield them from foreign competition. This promise became an early policy priority as he took office. But once Congress began working on the tariff legislation, the idea of a farm-focused tariff expanded dramatically. Business groups and industrial lobbies successfully pushed for higher tariffs on hundreds of manufactured goods as well. The bill grew larger, broader, and more complex than Hoover had originally intended. Meanwhile, the economic mood was shifting rapidly. In October 1929, the stock market crashed, signaling deeper problems in banking, credit, and consumer spending. Although Hoover initially hoped the downturn would be temporary, the pressure to protect American jobs intensified. Many lawmakers believed that raising tariffs, a familiar tool in U.S. history, would stabilize prices, reduce competition, and give domestic industries time to recover. But the world economy of 1930 was far more connected than earlier generations realized. When Hoover finally received the bill in June 1930, it was far more aggressive than the original plan. What started as narrow support for struggling farmers had transformed into one of the most sweeping tariff increases in modern U.S. history, raising duties on more than 20,000 imported goods. The law, officially named the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, increased import duties across a broad range of products, including agricultural goods, manufactured items, textiles, and everyday consumer goods. Supporters believed that if foreign products became more expensive, people would buy American goods, keeping factories running, stabilizing wages, and aiding farmers. However, the economy was already weakening after the 1929 crash, and raising tariffs meant introducing a major cost increase at a time when both American consumers and foreign trading partners were financially vulnerable. Historical records show that Hoover himself was hesitant about the final, broad version of the bill, but he faced strong political pressure to sign it, lest rejecting it be seen as a betrayal of his campaign promises. On June 17, 1930, Hoover signed Smoot-Hawley into law. Almost immediately, it became controversial. Economists and even some members of his administration warned that it could provoke retaliation abroad. And they were right. The world responded faster and more aggressively than expected. The economic impact of Smoot-Hawley was felt almost immediately, not just because of what happened inside the United States, but because of how the rest of the world responded. Within months, America's major trading partners enacted their own retaliatory tariffs. Countries saw the U.S. move as a hostile economic signal. Canada, one of the United States' largest export markets, reacted quickly by raising tariffs on over 100 U.S. products. Several European nations followed, raising duties on American goods or shifting trade relationships to competitors. These responses mattered because international trade was already weakening under the pressure of financial instability. When tariffs were raised on both sides, the flow of goods slowed dramatically. Between 1929 and 1933, U.S. exports fell by more than half, and imports declined just as sharply. Furthermore, world trade as a whole fell by nearly two-thirds between 1929 and 1932. While the Depression had multiple causes, economists widely agree that retaliatory tariff battles accelerated the decline. For American farmers and manufacturers dependent on foreign buyers, this was devastating. Export markets were closing, meaning fewer orders for factories and massive layoffs. The high tariffs, meant to protect, acted instead like a severe brake on an economy already losing momentum. What began as a domestic policy decision quickly became a global trade war, magnifying the economic pain at home and abroad. As the effects of Smoot-Hawley unfolded, the public debate shifted to a deeper question. Did this tariff actually cause the Great Depression? The honest answer, supported by economists and historians, is that it did not start the Depression. The stock market crash of October 1929, collapsing financial systems, deflation, and a severe reduction in consumer spending were already pushing the U.S. into recession months before the law took effect. However, many economists agree that tariff made the downturn significantly worse. Tariffs raised barriers when the economy was already fragile. As countries retaliated, global trade collapsed, removing demand for American exports precisely when businesses were desperate for customers. World trade didn't just slow, it cratered to nearly one-third of its previous level by 1932. The tariff damaged global confidence, signaled economic nationalism at the worst possible moment, and triggered a cycle of retaliation that deepened global instability. Most modern analyses conclude that Smoot-Hawley did not cause the Depression, but it contributed to the severity and duration of the downturn by accelerating the collapse of global trade and undermining international cooperation. In short, the tariff poured fuel on a fire that was already burning. The key lesson here is about sensitivity. When an economy is already under stress, decisions that disrupt trade or confidence can have far greater consequences than policymakers expect. By the early 1930s, it was clear that the high tariff strategy had backfired. International retaliation intensified, global trade continued to collapse, and the economic downturn deepened. When Franklin D. Roosevelt took office in 1933, one of his first major priorities was reversing the isolationist trade policy. The Roosevelt administration believed that recovery required rebuilding global trade relationships. In 1934, the United States passed the Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act, or RTAA, a major policy shift that effectively marked the end of the Smoot-Hawley era. Unlike the old system, where Congress set tariffs line by line, the RTAA allowed the president to negotiate bilateral agreements with other countries, reducing tariffs in both directions. This was the beginning of a long-term change in U.S. trade policy. The RTAA led to dozens of agreements that gradually lowered tariffs and helped rebuild international trade, laying the foundation for a more cooperative system that eventually evolved into modern institutions like the World Trade Organization. This shift wasn't just economic, it was diplomatic, signaling to the world that the United States wanted to restore stability. The aftermath of Smoot-Hawley demonstrated a powerful economic truth. Once trade barriers rise, they are difficult to unwind, and the damage can spread far beyond the industries they were meant to protect. The RTAA was an early acknowledgement of that lesson, a pivot away from economic nationalism towards a more interconnected world. When we look back at the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, the most important takeaway is that economic decisions made during moments of uncertainty can create consequences far beyond what policymakers intend, fundamentally shaping the course of history.